Hi guys! So JDICTION just sent me another one of their ResinCrete kits, and this time it's all about Christmas. So what I want to do for this video is I want to unbox this with you guys, and then depending on what we have in here, I really want to try mixing the ResinCrete with some epoxy resin and see what kind of results we get. So let's unbox this together, shall we? So inside this kit we get, right off the bat, we have the ResinCrete and we get 600 grams. We have 2 measuring cups, a Christmas tree mold, a snowman mold, an ornament mold, and there's 7 designs. Oh, they're really cute. A Christmas tree coaster mold, I think. Another mold, and it's a Santa, and it looks like you can make it stand up. That'll be interesting. Then we have this little palette thing. I'm assuming for you to put any paints if you're wanting to paint your ResinCrete. Spatula. I love these spatulas, by the way. They're really good at mixing epoxy resin. And lastly, we get some paint. We also have some instructions here, which is really great, especially if you're a beginner. And the instructions seem pretty straightforward. Here we have 300 grams per bag takes 90 ml of water. This is absolutely a must. I'm really happy they added that here because if you're a beginner, mixing up these things can be a bit tricky. So it's really good that they put exactly how much water you need per bag of ResinCrete. Now let's take a quick look on the other side. And okay, so work time is 8 minutes. And to me, that's actually kind of a bummer because that means that they did not add their new formula of ResinCrete in this kit. We have the old formula, which is only 8-minute work time. The new one is 25-minute work time. And for beginners, I think that would be better. That way they would have more wiggle room to mix the ResinCrete and then do whatever they want with it. But don't worry, I won't cheat. I will be using the ResinCrete that came in this kit. I won't cheat and use a 25-minute one. I will use the 8-minute one. So give me a moment. Let me figure out what I want to do with this kit with the epoxy resin, and I'll be right back so we can get crafting. Okay, so the molds I'll be using are the Christmas tree mold. I absolutely love Christmas trees, so I definitely have to make one of these. I might make one of these coasters, but as you guys can see, the design is pretty intricate, so it will all depend on how fast I can get the ResinCrete into this mold. And I definitely want to make the standing up Santa. I've never worked with a mold like this, so I definitely want to see what it's like. So because this video is all about learning how ResinCrete and epoxy resin bond together, and if they bond together, I'm going to be using JDICTION'S High Gloss 3x Yellow Resistant Epoxy Resin. I'm going to be mixing up 2 ounces of this resin, and it's mostly going to be for the Santa and the Christmas tree. I'm going to be using the epoxy resin to color in the Santa mold. As you guys can see, the mold has these like little raised grooves for the design of the mold. So I'm going to be using those as a barrier to keep the epoxy resin in. And as for the Christmas tree mold, I'm only going to be using the epoxy for the star. Okay, so as I'm mixing up my resin, let's talk about the 3 things I want to test in this video. So the first thing is I want to see how ResinCrete bonds with tacky resin. If you don't know what tacky resin is, it's when your resin is at that sticky, super thick stage and you pretty much have to leave it because there's nothing else you can do with it. The next thing I want to test out is, does ResinCrete stick to cured resin? Now this one has been on my mind because obviously once your resin is cured, it's solid. So I'm wondering if uncured ResinCrete can bond to cured resin. And lastly, I just want to grab some uncured resin and some uncured ResinCrete, put them in together and see what happens. Now that my colors are all mixed up, let's fill these molds. So I'm gonna start with the Christmas tree mold, and I'm only gonna be using the resin to fill up the star. If you celebrate Christmas and decorate with a Christmas tree, let me know in the comments down below what you put on top of your Christmas tree. When I was a kid, my mom would always put like a Christmas angel or a Santa Claus on top, but now that I'm grown up and out of the house, we always put a Christmas star on top. Now let's do Santa, and Santa is gonna be quite a bit of work. It took me about 15 to 20 minutes, but don't worry, I've sped this part up. I've reduced the video footage down to like a minute, I think it is. You're welcome. And I'm going to be coloring him in with the resin. So I have the red for his clothes and some of the candy cane, this nudie color for his nose and face, and lastly, black for his big black boots. So for the white, I'm just going to be using the ResinCrete to fill in all the white gaps. So for his beard, the trim on his clothes, the white part of the candy cane, the fluffy ball on his hat, that will be white from the ResinCrete. And then as I'm filling those parts in, I'm going to keep filling it all the way up to the top to finish the piece. One tricky thing about what I'm doing here is knowing how much resin to put into each segment. If you put too much resin, the resin will spill over and go into the other segments and then possibly mix with the other colors. Or if you put too little resin, the resin will pull away from the mold and then you'll end up with some spotty areas. It's definitely one of those projects where you have to take your time because it's a process. If you were using UV resin, it's a lot easier because all you have to do is fill in the segments, flash cure it, and it's done. But because I'm using epoxy resin here, I'll need to babysit it a bit more and then check in on it every 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure none of that resin is pulling away from the mold. Now I'm going to let the Santa and the Christmas tree mold sit for about an hour to an hour and a half to get to the tacky stage, and then I'll come back to pour some ResinCrete on top. But before I go off, I want to quickly use up this black resin. I ended up mixing up way too much. So I'm going to get one of my ornament molds and I'm going to pour this resin into it. So then tomorrow, once it's cured, I'll pour some ResinCrete on top and then we can find out whether or not ResinCrete can bond to cured resin. Okay guys, so it's been 2 hours and our resin is tacky, so I can go ahead and mix up the ResinCrete. I have here 95 grams of water and I'm going to be mixing it with one of the bags of the ResinCrete powder. Now the instructions do say to use only 90 grams of water, but I read somewhere where if you're going to be adding acrylic paint to it, which I will be doing here, you should add a couple of extra grams of water because acrylic paint is absorbent. By the way, don't do what I did here. I ended up with a mess. I wanted to try doing it where I put the water in first and then the powder on top, since I usually do the powder first and then water on top. But yeah, it didn't work out for me. I ended up with a mess. But let me know in the comments how you do it. If you use ResinCrete, do you put the water in first or the ResinCrete first? Okay guys, so now that the ResinCrete is mixed up, it's crunch time. We need to get this ResinCrete into these molds. For the Santa, all I had to do was pour the ResinCrete straight into the mold and that was it. It was pretty straightforward. But for the Christmas tree, I wanted it to be green, so I grabbed a little bit of acrylic paint. This time I used a darker color. I learned my lesson from the last time. When dyeing ResinCrete, you need to use a darker color because ResinCrete is so white, so it will mute those colors. And I only had to use 2 blobs of paint this time, and I actually got the shade that I was looking for. By the way, I think I forgot to mention that I am using the Santa piece and the Christmas tree piece as the tester pieces to showcase if the ResinCrete will bond with the tacky resin. Now for the base of the Santa piece, I'm going to be going for some candy cane vibes. And this is the piece where I'm going to try the uncured resin and the uncured ResinCrete mixed together. The red stripes is the uncured resin, and as for the white that I'll be pouring in just a moment, that's the ResinCrete. I'm really curious to see how this turns out tomorrow. I'm really wondering if this is even going to cure properly, but we do have to wait until tomorrow. As we all know, epoxy resin takes about 24 hours to cure, so we do have to wait until tomorrow, unfortunately. Okay, so now I'm going to let all these pieces cure up, and then in the morning I'll come back, mix up a little bit more ResinCrete, pour it on the cured resin, and then once that's cured, I'll come back and then we can demold all the pieces together. Okay guys, so all the pieces are cured now, and we have the ResinCrete with the cured resin, the tacky resin with the ResinCrete, and then this one, as you guys remember, this is the one where I put both of the things that were uncured together. And I don't know if you can tell on camera, but something's definitely happened with this one, so I'm really excited and interested to see what's happened on the other side. But first, let's start with the ResinCrete and the cured resin. Okay, so we have both pieces here. So far they look bonded, but now the real test is I'm going to try and push this off and let's see what happens. That's interesting. So what I thought was going to happen isn't happening, but I'm wondering if it's because I'm being a little bit too careful with it. Let me be a little bit more persistent and rough with it. So what I thought was going to happen isn't happening. It's not sliding off, but here I do have it where there's things. So I'm going to see if I can peel it off. Okay, there we go. So what I thought was going to happen, okay, I see. It's because there's that little lip. That's why it wasn't it wasn't sliding off like I thought it would be. So once your resin is cured, ResinCrete will not bond to it. So that's test number 1. Now let's do the tacky resin with the ResinCrete and let's see if that's stuck together. I'm actually really excited to see how our Santa looks. I really hope the resin didn't move much. Oh, that looks so cute. Oh, look how cute Santa looks. Oh, we have a bubble there, but that's okay. Oh, that looks really cute. Okay, so now let's see. Obviously, I don't want to break this, but let's just see if I can take this off. I'm trying to like slide it off, push it off, but that's not working. So I think that this is definitely solid. The thing is with resin, once it's tacky, if it's still sticky, it will stick to anything. As long as it's not like silicone or like latex, it will bond. So yeah, this is glued on here. So if you're wanting to mix ResinCrete with epoxy resin, your resin definitely has to be uncured at some type of tacky stage for it to still stick to the ResinCrete. Now let's do the Christmas tree. I'm really excited about this one. Oh, okay, so we do have some air bubbles there, but that's okay. Let's keep going. Is that wet? Okay, no, it's not wet. It's just the shine from the mold on the ResinCrete. Now I have to be super careful here because we don't want that to break. Okay. Oh no! My Christmas tree broke. Oh no. Okay, hold on. You definitely have to be a bit more gentle than I am. I'm being a little bit too rough. I have to slow down. Oh, but our star looks perfect. It's so tiny and cute. Okay, so we did get a clean break on that, so I can easily glue that. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I got some crazy glue here, and I'm just going to put a little bit, and then our Christmas tree should be fine. It was a clean break, so this will stick. So I'm actually just going to let this sit, and let's move on to the next piece. As the Christmas tree is drying, let's take a look at the Santa base. Now, I'm going to show you guys up close so you can see what happened. And as the ResinCrete was curing, it's absorbed some of the epoxy resin because we have some divots in the epoxy resin there. It goes down. So let's see what it looks like on the other side. Oh, surprisingly, there's none of the divots, but you can see that that resin and the dye was absorbed into the ResinCrete, and it still looks pretty cool, but it has been absorbed and it's left these funny grooves in the resin there. But that's okay, that's the bottom side. No one's actually going to look at it. So now let's see if this fits in there. And yeah, oh look, it's a snug fit. That's perfect. And there's our little Santa. That's really cute. Oh, I love that. I just need to maybe add some like little eyes for Santa so he can actually see. But going back to this test, if you are going to mix ResinCrete with the epoxy resin, both uncured, I guess kind of expect there to be these like little divots and have it where the ResinCrete will absorb that resin. So maybe put a little bit of extra resin in there. I don't know. This was just one test. Let me know if you've tried this and what were your results like. I ended up with some extra ResinCrete, so I threw it into this ornament mold to make some ornaments for my girls. That way they'll have something to do over the Christmas holiday break, and yeah, they can just paint it up and then they won't be bored. Which reminds me, I totally forgot about the coaster mold, but I guess it's just gonna have to wait for another video. Sorry guys. But yeah, when it comes to working with ResinCrete and epoxy resin, I highly suggest that you let that epoxy resin get to a tacky stage and then add your ResinCrete. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you've learned something. If you did, please give this video a big fat thumbs up. And if you'd like to see other resin crafting videos that I've done on this channel, then be sure to check out one of the ones that are popping on screen now. Thank you all so much for watching. Happy holidays!